Hey YouTube, Fishing Freak 18 here. I got a video request to do a how-to video on a gasoline powered scooter conversion, or most commonly known as a chainsaw powered scooter, from Skateboard Rider 100. This is your request. I'm doing a video on it, so I'm going to try and explain in the best way that I can on how to make this. Now, there really isn't a way to do this because these things are completely custom, but we'll start off with a motor. Since you said you already had a frame, it's an E175, it's a Razor. I've got a good idea what that frame looks like, so I'll go ahead and explain the two different types of clutches on chainsaws and exactly how they work. Alright, here we go. What you're looking at are the two different types of clutches. You have one that's on the Poulan chainsaw, which is on the right, which faces outward. Then you have one which is like on the McCulloch chainsaw, which is on the left, which faces inward. Alright, well, the problem with chainsaw clutches, they have the wrong kind of teeth. So what you're going to have to do is figure out a way to grind those teeth off. And I'll show you an example of what these teeth look like when they come on saw. This is what chainsaw chain teeth look like. And as you can see, that's a lot different from the sprocket right here that a chain would go up to. Now, what you need to do, grind those teeth off, okay? Best thing to use would be a lathe because you would get a more concentric circle. Most people don't have access to that though because you're talking about $10,000 worth of equipment. So what you would use is a bench grinder, like the one above right there, like I have, and then just try and grind off those teeth and get a nice concentric circle. Alright, once you've done that, this is the biggest problem with the two different types of clutch designs. Personally, I would go with one like this, because once you grind the teeth off, you can just put the sprocket on there and weld it on like I've done. Alright, so that's pretty easy. The problem with these kind of clutches on the McCulloch, on the left, it's an inner clutch. So, as you can see, I'm trying to pick this up. Inside of there, you have to make sure that the sprocket's completely aligned so that the chain doesn't rub against the chainsaw block or the other side of that clutch. That's the hardest part about a clutch like this. The only reason I actually use this motor is because a friend of mine got it for me. And it's a massive chainsaw. It's about a 61cc, so it's got a lot of power. I had it on one of my scooters with the sprocket teeth stripped out, but we'll get back to that later. So that's the first thing you need to do, is figure out how to weld a sprocket on there and grind it off. Another tip, make sure you get a saw that's at least about 45cc, 42 at the lowest. That's what that Poulan is. The orange one's a 42 and the yellow one's a 61. Alright. I don't know whether or not your E175 is chain drive or belt drive. That's another thing. If it's belt drive, that's going to be a little tougher to do. You can't really use belts with a chainsaw because it's too much torque unless you use like lawnmower belts, but that's too much trouble. So if it's not chain drive, you're going to have to figure out how to mount a sprocket on that back wheel. Best way to do that is either by bolting it on, probably, or welding it on. I couldn't tell you because I don't have that kind of scooter, but that's two of the ways to do it. The next infinitely most important thing, make sure you get the right gear ratio. Now when I say gear ratios, I mean, let's say you have an 8-inch wheel, so you would buy about a 7.5-inch sprocket, or almost an 8-inch sprocket. So then what you would do is get a 1-inch sprocket for the motor. Don't go any bigger than 1 inch on the motor, or else the gear ratio will be off and it'll just burn the clutch out and it won't even rev out. So what you need to do, like I've done on these, both of these have a 1-inch sprocket. You can see this one better. It's a 12 tooth, I think. You want to get the right gear ratio or your machines are not going to go anywhere. So you want to have a ratio with a motor this size of usually about 10 to 1. You can go a little bit lower, I don't know how well it would be. I went about 6 to 1 with the McCulloch, which is the one on the left, but that's a bigger motor, so it had more power. To calculate your gear ratio though, this is the bike I'm currently working on, and it had the wrong gear ratio, which is why I had to redo my design and do a jack shaft instead to get the right gear ratio. That's a 16-inch wheel. Well, that sprocket's only 8.5 inches. So I had a 1 inch on my motor and an 8.5 inch on the wheel. Well, my ratio worked out to be 8.5 to 1, meaning that the motor needed to turn, this right here on the clutch needed to turn 8.5 times in order for that wheel to turn once. Well, the problem with that was I had a 16-inch wheel, so that just burned the clutch out and it didn't rev out all the way. So what you need to make sure you go ahead and do is get a ratio that's similar to your wheel size. So it's going to have about a 16 to 1 ratio. Now, jack shafts are a little harder to calculate. I'll do another video on that one day. But next thing that's hard to do is mounting a motor. Chainsaw motors like this one or the one on the left, chainsaws are typically easier to mount than weed eaters are. And I wouldn't even use a weed eater, honestly. Go with a chainsaw. They have more torque, more powerful, better for all that kind of stuff. Next hardest thing is mounting it. An E175, I couldn't tell you honestly because I don't have a picture of it. I know what they look like, but if you took your axle and where the bolts bolt the back wheel on, you could run some kind of metal plate or bed frame, which is like angle steel, drill through it and probably bolt something up. It would be a little tougher to do, but you would still have to do a little welding. That's pretty much it. I honestly couldn't tell you anything from mounting from there. Next thing, throttle. Well, throttle's easy. All you need is a bicycle brake handle and bicycle brake cable. You just need a longer one than the ones that weed eaters or chainsaws have on them. And what you do is figure out a way to connect them. That one's got the line coming out from the carburetor. What I'm going to do is connect that to my brake handle lever. So that'll act as the throttle. Let's see if there's anything else. There's really not much I can explain to you because I don't have that frame with me. But those are the basics of these projects. You just have to really use your imagination because these things really don't have a way to mount because it's a chainsaw and they're not really designed for this, but they do have the power to do it. So if there's any more questions that you have, just let me know. I'll get back with you. Anything about gear ratios, things of that sort, yeah, just let me know, man. I guess I'll see you in the gear ratio vid. Later.